Welcome to the Work the System podcast, where we help entrepreneurs make more and work less using systems. And I'm your host, Josh Fonger. And today we have a special guest. We have Steve Anderson. Steve has spent his 35-year career helping the insurance industry understand, integrate, and leverage current and emerging technologies. From business management systems to social platforms, Steve can analyze what's happening now and explain its implications for the future. And that's why I'm excited to have Steve on to share his new book and the wisdom from that new book, which is called The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon, which we'll be discussing today. All right, so Steve, excited to have you on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory, your history, and what makes you uniquely qualified to analyze Jeff Bezos's letters?
Letters, yeah. Well, Josh, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. As you said, I've been in the insurance industry primarily as an insurance agent and broker for my entire career, working at two independent agencies, one in Washington, D.C. area, one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Kind of during that time, I got very interested in technology and how it was impacting agents and brokers and the insurance industry at large. And so about a little over 20 years ago, I started my own firm doing research, speaking, writing, and consulting around technology and its impact on the industry. And so that led me to really understanding risk, but the risk in conjunction with technology development. And I came to the conclusion a few years ago that one of the biggest risks businesses face today is not actually taking enough risk. And so as I was researching that idea, I came across Amazon, and widely known as innovative, forward-thinking, obviously growing really rapidly. And so I started asking, okay, what did they do differently? And that led me to the Bezos letters to shareholders. So 1997 through 2018, 21 letters. That what I discovered as I did a deep dive is he actually laid out what I call hidden in plain sight, his plan for building Amazon that I was fascinated with and felt like some really good nuggets of ideas and wisdom and what became the 14 principles that any business could use.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very cool. Well, I'm excited to dive into these. So, knowing that small business owners are the audience here, can they learn from a company like Amazon? Is Amazon too big to learn from, or what do you think?
Well, Amazon was a small company. When Bezos started it, it was literally himself as the first employee in 1994, went live in 1995, went public in 1997, and continued to grow from there. So yes, I think we can learn. And I make the point in the book, you don't necessarily want to be Amazon, maybe, and that's okay. But aren't you a bit curious how they did it? And that was the mindset that I came. And what I discovered in reading through the letters is that I believe Bezos is the master of risk. And that's my insurance background, risk management background, but he uses risk strategically to grow. And so I believe any business, certainly small business, and frankly, any organization, even a nonprofit, can learn from what he's done and how he set things up. So I am not saying you're going to be the next Amazon. Probably you aren't. But that doesn't mean you can't grow in the area and as much as you want to grow.
Mm-hmm. Well, so before we get into all 14 principles, and we probably won't get through all of them, I'm curious. So did his letters change from the beginning to the end in terms of the way he dealt with risk or the way he thought about risk, or was it consistent?
Actually, it was remarkably consistent. I actually think as the years went on, he realized he needed to take more risk. And in fact, in 2016 and 17, he said that as Amazon has grown, the size of their failures need to grow. And that's really counterintuitive, right? We think of failure as we don't want to do that. And so the first principle I have in growth is successful failure. And it's the idea of, and this is all about Bezos and what Amazon is doing, it's about experimenting with what might work. And an experiment by its very nature means it could fail. In fact, if you know it's not going to fail, it's not an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But most businesses absolutely think of failure as failure, not as what am I learning that I can do something else with.
Mm-hmm.
And even small businesses, I've gotten the question a bit around, well, entrepreneurs, people who start small businesses are risk takers. And I would say, yes, they are. Except if you look at the percentage that are still in business after the first year or the 5 years, and all those numbers, there are a lot that don't make it. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not just taking risk without any idea of how do I be successful with the risk that I'm taking and how do I protect the downside. So think about that. In fact, he says we need to have billion-dollar failures as a company. Now they're big, okay? So I'm not saying bet your company on one thing, but think about how can I structure it so it's a smart risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can test in the beginning. And the 14 principles, I've actually broken down into 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale. And every business is always going through those cycles based on department, division, product, service that you might be thinking about providing to your customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we can run through a scenario because I've got a client who's dealing with this. I've got a lot of clients who are dealing with this, but one in particular I'm thinking about where they have had a history of always doing marketing a certain way. So they send out direct mail. They're in they're in magazines, and they do referral work. Right? They got a big sign out front, and they want to transition to more social media. They want to transition to more digital marketing, more advertising, and they don't know, will it work? Will it not work? They don't have a huge budget. They have to stop their old marketing to take the money to go to the new marketing. Would this test, build, accelerate, scale, would that work with this kind of situation?
Yeah, I think it would, especially the test area. So, taking a risk is a smart risk. And so what can we do, even taking a small percentage of their existing budget and putting it into something new? And then part of the key there obviously is tracking and figuring out, okay, how is this working? How many leads are we getting in? What happens with those leads? Do we have a correct follow-up process in place? So if it's a digital lead coming to a website, are we capturing the name? And right, I think probably what they might know intuitively. And one of the other principles, and it's in the accelerate area. So test is, okay, let's find out. Build is, okay, let's take more steps to maybe transition more of that money. Accelerate is, okay, we're seeing some success here. How can we build on that? But I think one of the things that a lot of business owners get into is decision paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bezos, in his 2016 letter, actually lays out their decision process. And at Amazon, there are 2 types of decisions. They call them type 1 and type 2. So type 1 decisions are irreversible, bet the farm. We make a decision. It's really difficult, if not impossible, to move back. And Bezos says very few decisions at a business are type 1. Type 2 decisions are reversible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Amazon's leadership principles is default to action.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you should make decisions with 70%, maybe even less, of the information you wish you had. But if you wait till you have more information, you're going too slow. And so type 2 decisions he calls reversible. If we walk through that door and we decide, you know what, this isn't working, we don't like what's happening, we just make another decision, either back through the door or a different door in a different direction. But we default to action. And one of the dangers in a larger company as you grow is that you tend to have decision-making process slow down because now you have more layers to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And at Amazon, they have created a system and a process to allow decisions to be made quickly at the lowest level possible,
Mm-hmm.
and to go back to successful failure saying, okay, we know all decisions aren't going to be the right decisions the first time, but we also know that if we keep moving, we'll get there eventually, and typically quicker than we would have if we waited for the information we needed or thought we needed.
Interesting. So the idea is if you make a decision, that'll give you maybe that extra 30% of information you couldn't have gotten anyways. You might as well make the decision to learn it.
You might as make this decision to learn and go forward. Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach calls this the 80-20. And he basically says no matter what project you're working on, you will only get 80% done, no matter how long you work on it. Because until you put it out there and you get feedback, you can't get to that next 20%. And so now if you do the 80% again, now you're at 96%, but you're getting feedback. Google taught that to us, many years ago with Gmail, right? And all of their different products that they put out in beta, sometimes for years, as they were getting feedback and building. And I think that's that action, taking steps to move forward, and not in terms of your client, I go back to, and not going, oh, we don't know what we're doing. Well, you know what? You're not going to know what you're doing until you actually do something. And you can learn from people like yourselves and others, but action is the best step to move forward and be smart about the investment that you make. So another concept in the book I'll introduce here is, I'm sure that client of yours is looking at, okay, what's my return on investment, right? My ROI. Well, I introduce a concept in the book called ROR. What's your return on risk? So if I don't take this risk, what's the negative consequence? If I do take this risk, what are the consequences and what are the potential advantages? And so evaluating in a similar way your risk taking to be able to move forward. And again, reemphasize, in today's world with technology changing as rapidly as it is, businesses just don't have the time they used to. They could take a year or 2 years to figure out what's coming. They can't do that today.
Yep. Yeah, things are definitely moving faster. And I like the idea of most of the decisions in business can be reversed quite quickly.
Yes.
And you can pivot quite, businesses are much more nimble than they used to be. It's not like you are building a skyscraper, then you change your mind, you want to move it 10 feet to the left. I mean, you do have that ability. I think people forget that.
No question. And Amazon has this process, again, I describe a little bit in the book, called a 6-page memo. So at Amazon, PowerPoint or keynote presentations are banned. Nobody does it. If they have a meeting, somebody calls a meeting that needs a decision to move forward. Let's say it's a new product introduction, we want to do this. The person calling the meeting is required to write what's called a 6-page memo. And it starts with a press release on the day the product's released. So the person or the team, it actually ends up being the team that's proposing this new venture, new product, new service, they write this memo. The meeting comes together. You sit down at the meeting and hand out the memo. You do not hand it out beforehand. And you spend the first 15, 20, 25 minutes, everybody reading the memo. Fascinating process, because now what it does is you don't get people saying, oh yeah, I looked at the memo when they really didn't. And you get the focus time there, study hall is what they call it, and everybody's on the exact same page. And now they don't go over what is it, because they've just read the whole structure of what we're proposing. Now they can go, here are the questions we have. So their meetings actually are more efficient, even though it takes more time to prepare for it.
That's very interesting. So they start with the idea that it's already being released to the public, and what would that pressure
and work back. Yeah, and again, because Amazon is so customer focused, in fact, they very specifically use the terms customer obsessive. They obsess over customers, but it's always starting from the customer viewpoint. What's the benefit? And then working back, what do we have to do to deliver that benefit?
So do your concepts of testing, building, accelerate, scale, are those in sequence? Do you have to do them in that order? Can you do scale before testing, or does it have to go that way?
Well, more than likely, if you're an existing business, you may already be having trouble with scaling, right? In terms of, okay, we've got a product, we've got a service, we might need to add a few here or there. That would be testing and building. But you might jump in and go, you know what, we need to help in scaling. And scaling, how do you maintain culture? I mean, so think about it. Amazon literally starting in 25 years, going from a handful of employees to over 650,000 employees today, with actually about 20 to 30,000 job openings right now. They're looking for people. How do you maintain a culture? Now, again, that could be going from 5 to 25, right? So the scale there, but the same question comes up. How do you maintain the values, the vision, the DNA of what makes us a business as you scale and bring more people in? And then the business owner now has a harder time, right, doing one-on-one with everybody. So I've got to almost now be a teacher to incorporate those ideas for our business that make us who we are and make us successful.
So it sounds like different aspects of your business are in the testing phase, and some different aspects of your business are in the building and the acceleration and the scale all simultaneously. So you can't just say the company as a whole is accelerating, and maybe it is sales